Happy Friday and welcome to another Methodist moment with Pastor Matt. Today we're going to be talking about that uniquely Methodist topic of itinerancy. That's kind of that big word that means pastors move. We move around every few years. And so I wanted to give a brief idea of kind of where that came from and then how it works today. And so where itinerancy came from is back with our founders and the early Methodist Church in America. We had John Wesley in particular over in England who rode a horse and was a horse-drawn carriage all over England. Hundreds of thousands of miles he would travel to preach at different churches, to preach outside on different lawns, to preach to congregations of all different sizes, several days a week. He was preaching as much as he possibly could to get the message of Christ to the people all over England and to the revival that was so important there. And then when the Methodist movement shifted over into America, there was another British man who had come over that John Wesley had called to share the good news and to be kind of the presiding elder, ultimately the bishop of the early American church. And his name was Francis Asbury. And Francis Asbury was riding around on horseback all across the colonies and the early states, those 13 states, to share that same message, to share that same revival in Jesus Christ, that early Methodist movement. He traveled so much on horseback that he was so incredibly well known in the early America that when there's one story that I love to share is that somebody wanted to get a message to him, a letter to him. And so they didn't know where he was going to be. They didn't know where he would be, and so they wrote the letter, they addressed it, Francis Asbury, USA. And they put the stamp on it and gave it to the mailman. And sure enough, Francis Asbury got that letter several days later. They were able to find him. They just said, Francis Asbury, USA, and stuck it in the mailbox. Isn't that incredible? That's how much he traveled. That's how well he was known in his itinerant horseback ministry. And then as the American frontier pushed further and further west, what we saw was itinerant ministers that would go on horseback between several different congregations, 4 or 5 churches at a time. And so they would be at one church on one Sunday morning, and then the next week they would serve a different church. And then the next week after that, a different one. And they'd run a circuit of about 4 or 5 churches. And that way they could reach more people. That way they could serve more communities. And the Methodist movement could grow and grow, and the Christian revival during the 1800s could grow more and more. And it was incredibly successful, amazingly successful. That's how Methodism spread, and that's how, during the 1800s, American Christianity grew. But then today, that has shifted a little bit. Now, pastors only serve one church, usually. I served 2 churches in my first appointment, but usually we serve just one church at a time. And we see them every single week, right? We don't go between different churches, one week here, one week somewhere else. Now what happens is itinerancy describes our appointative process, right? The bishop appoints a pastor to a church to serve for several years. And we don't know exactly how long we'll serve. Kind of each year we're re-upped. But we don't know exactly how long we'll serve. But when the bishop calls our name to serve somewhere else, we are happy to go. That's how the pastors at this church and at others in the Methodist tradition work. When the bishop calls, working with the several district superintendents, we move. We serve where we are called to serve, and then we get to rotate. That way you see more and more pastors, several ideas, and the joy of Christianity spread throughout. over the course of generations. And so that's how itinerancy works. It works now from the bishop through the district superintendents to the local church pastors to see how we move, to see how we stay for several years, to see how we then move on to a new appointment and begin there. And that movement is exciting. That movement leads to new ideas, fresh ideas, and the continuation of the glorification of the kingdom of God. That's what we're about. That's how we work in our itinerant system. We hope you join us next week for our final Methodist moment, and we are looking forward to that one and wrapping up this series. So we hope you join us next Friday as well. Have a good day.